Okay, so I think it's fair to say that history has not been very kind to Milli Vanilli. I mean, they went from winning a Grammy to being remembered as a duo who don't actually sing any of their songs. Today on the podcast, there's a new documentary about Milli Vanilli, and it just might change how you remember their legacy. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. I hope you don't mind, but we're going to start this by maybe taking a journey back to 1988.
Girl, you know it's true. I love you. Yes, you know it's true.
You remember the jam. Of course you remember the jam. That is a bit of Girl, You Know It's True from Milli Vanilli. This is a song. This is a song that introduced the world to Rod Pilatus and Fab Morvan, two black dudes from Europe, Germany, and France to be exact, who took the pop world by storm with their look, with their style. You could just not get enough of them. They photographed so well. They were on the cover of every magazine. And because of this song, Milli Vanilli's debut album sold millions of copies. But then the twist came, right? We found out that Rob and Fab did not sing a single note on any of the records. And to this day, I think if you say Milli Vanilli, you're probably going to get maybe a laugh or an eye roll. But there's a new documentary on Paramount Plus that takes a look not just at the rise and fall of Milli Vanilli, which we kind of know the story of broadly, but what was missed by the media and also the fans of the duo. Hanif Abdulrakib is an executive producer on that doc. Hanif is here on the show. Hanif is a friend. What's going on, pal? How are you?
Well, it's good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Let me start by saying I confess to you that when I hear the words Milli Vanilli, which is not often, it is always in the context of a joke. It's always in the context of some kind of sneering. I think what you made here is a corrective, in a sense. What would you say is the thesis of this documentary?
Yeah, well, for me, and I think for Lieutenant Bradley, who did it, the big goal was to kind of zoom out and have a lens on the group that was not just rooted in what happened to them. Right? I mean, fixing the story of Milli Vanilli to two young black guys who had a dream dreamed so large that they were exploited. Sometimes when you have a big dream and you feel like you can go to any lengths to achieve it, exploitation kind of latches onto you, and they ran into Frank Farian, who was an expert in a very specific kind of exploitation, right? And so,
yeah.
A lot of the documentary was attempting to not only contextualize their quote unquote downfall, or literal downfall, I think you could say,
yeah,
but to also add some kind of emotional hues and emotional coloring to it, to expand beyond just the duo being a joke.
Right. I mean, the idea that I like that you said it was a literal downfall, because we know that part happened, but it's all of the other colors around that downfall that you're sort of trying to fill in. Behind, I think, every artist being exploited in the music industry is usually a contract that they sign without maybe fully understanding everything that is in the fine print. We've seen a lot of conversations about the kind of contracts that people kind of get trapped into. Rob and Fab of Milli Vanilli, they were no different. What happened there in terms of the contract that they signed?
They signed a contract that was that kind of contractually stated that they would not be singing on these songs, right? And they got paid. They got paid some money up front, which I think, of course, for them. And it bears mentioning they were very young.
Yeah, 21 and 24, they said. Yeah,
21 and 24. Yeah, and they had been grinding for a bit. They were dancing on these kind of music video shows in Amsterdam, and they were trying to break larger. They were living in poverty, and so to get any level of money up front that felt substantial was ideal. And they signed without kind of looking at the fine print, and then they had the news broken to them that they weren't going to sing on the records.
Right.
And by the time they coped with that and did not decided they don't want to do that, it was kind of too late, because
right.
And so they have to pay back the money, which they of course could not do. And, I think a part of it that people don't understand, and maybe I hope understand with the doc, is that, no one, I think, expected them to be as big as they were. That's the kind of thing.
Right. This was not the plan.
Yeah, the plan was maybe to, get in, get out, have a song or two, This was never going. It really got away from them in a good way for their success, but in a bad way for the whole scheme of the making of Milli Vanilli, a facade of Milli Vanilli.
There's a real sort of propulsion to that getting away from them in the documentary where, they kind of go, oh my God, we're selling millions of records. What is happening? Oh my God, America wants us. What is happening? Oh my God, we're nominated for a Grammy. What is happening? Oh my God, we are winning a Grammy. What is happening? Yeah. And at every sort of step of the way, there is like this sense of like, okay, we've bought in this far. How can we not sort of buy in a little bit further? And then there's sort of all these moneyed interests around them that are sort of encouraging them to be like, just stay the course for this. Even though, as you can kind of tell, that it was beginning to eat away at them in a way.
Yeah, I think one thing that we really tried to do in the doc is lay out how big they were and how quickly it happened, because I think that's maybe a little bit hard for people to grasp today now.
Yeah.
Part because so much music comes out, and because music stardom is filtered through different lenses than it was in the late 80s, early 90s. Milli Vanilli, it happened so fast. The rise and fall happened very quickly. There is a part of it where it just, you can sense that it was getting away from even them, right? And then there's a part where they embraced it. They embraced, you play a character, you put forth a facade for so long that you begin to embody it, and I think that the pace at which it was happening, for the pace at which that happened for them is kind of alarming. We tried to touch on that in the doc, speed with which this happened almost required them to fully buy into the act. So any nervousness or anxiety they had to go away because they were performing.
Well, we should also give a bit of context in terms of like who the wizard behind the curtain is, because we get introduced to this character of Frank Farian. He's a producer behind Milli Vanilli. We also learn actually this idea of like lip syncing and putting a face to an artist, putting sort of a different face to a voice. This wasn't even the first time that Frank Farian did this. Who else did he do that with?
Boney M.
Rasputin Boney M.
Yeah, Rasputin. And, and it was kind of a similar, it was a similar attempt at an approach, right? In terms of the racialized aspect of it. Bobby Farrell's Black and Frank Farian is not, and Marissa Barrett was Black and Liz Mitchell was Black. And, Frank Farian had these Black artists in front of an audience singing. And he was actually the voice behind Boney M. He was the actual voice behind
He's
Boney
the one
M.
who sings Rasputin, which is
Rasputin.
Wild to think about. And Bobby's not the one who's singing. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, wild song. And so, he was, he had done this before, and he had kind of masterminded this for, and it bears mentioning that he attempted to do it after, too, with the kind of the quote unquote real Milli Vanilli. So this is his, that's his MO. And I think another thing we tried to do in the documentary was kind of touch on the racialized aspects of this, of putting forth a Black group, putting forth Black faces or Black performers, but kind of stripping them of any autonomy. They were actually very literally machines,
right?
Kind of musical machines at the whims of a white producer.
So let's talk about what eventually ended the imposter run, because the documentary sort of has this crescendo of the Grammy moment, of them accepting the Grammy on the stage. So let's talk about how it all unraveled.
Yeah. Well, what's the Grammy, right? What's funny is, I think if you ask people, myself included, because I was young when the unraveling happened,
yeah,
I remember it incorrectly. And working on this documentary is actually a correction for me. And I've talked to people about it, and it's also a correction for them. I thought Milli Vanilli's unraveling happened at the Connecticut MTV concert when the tape skipped.
Right.
And the lip syncing was revealed.
Watching that video is so cringe because
it is tough.
They're jumping on the stage, and then the audio starts skipping, and then they run off the stage and they don't know what to do.
Sprint off the stage.
Yeah.
But I thought that was it. I as a kid, I was like, oh, that's what did them in.
Yeah.
They had an arc after that.
Right.
It was the Grammy that did them in. And I think the behavior after the Grammy, because not only did they win the Grammy, and I think people But it has to be said too that by the time they won the Grammy, people in the music industry, in the entertainment industry, people knew, people weren't fools.
Yeah.
They knew they were lip syncing. They knew they weren't really singing. And so to award them a Grammy, I think, bothered people. And then the way that the group began to behave after the Grammy, there was the quote about being like, bigger than the Beatles, these kind of things.
Yeah.
I think that, the Grammy empowered them. It empowered their egos. And what it also did was it empowered them over Frank Farian.
Right.
It gave them power over Frank Farian, who did not care for the exercising of that power and decided then to pull the rug out from under them, so to speak.
Well, I have to say the most difficult but also most compelling part of the documentary to me was watching Fab, who is the still alive member of Milli Vanilli, react to the post-Grammy win. The quote that he gives you is, "Did we deserve to win the Grammy?"
Yeah.
Some people say no. And I'm like, what? People say yes, Fab. Like, who are the people who are like, what's the away team here? And then he says, a very small part of me believes that we should have won the Grammy. I'm like, this is extraordinary. It is extraordinary to even in the moment where you didn't sing a single note, you're still like, yeah, but we worked really hard. We danced really well. We went through this whole thing. Maybe there's a part of me that believes we should have won the Grammy.
You know what? I do want to say, I mean, Fab is, there's so much gratitude for Fab.
Yes.
And how candid he was and how generous he was and how the clarity with which he told the story and how honest he was and self-critical, but also, and I had that initial, when I first saw the tape and I was like, well, when he started the sentence was like, we didn't sing the song, so we don't deserve the Grammy. I was like, of course, Fab. Yeah. But I actually think he's right. That part of him that says, yes, I get it. I understand it. Right. Yeah. Because, one, I mean, to say the very least, I'm a Grammy skeptic. So at this point, who cares?
It helps. Yes, sure.
Yeah, it helps. But I get that they endured something to make those records. Even if the voice on the record wasn't theirs, they endured something to make those records. And I don't want to take away from the folks who actually performed those songs, Charles Shaw, and those folks performed the vocals. But there was work beyond the vocalizing. Now, I would not award them a Grammy personally, but I understand the small part of Fab that says, yeah, there was work that went into this beyond just the singing.
Right, like they did, we did suffer something for this, but their art is sort of, I guess, performance, literally in the sense of acting as though they were performers, as opposed to the people who were actually making the record. I did not remember that they were up against Indigo Girls, and I was like, you know what? Let's go. I want to recount, because come on,
Soul to Soul too. It's like Indigo Girls and Soul to Soul, and they, let us not go down the path of Grammys, because I am a Grammy pessimist, to say the least.
I do know that. I know that very well about you. Okay, so listen, it's been 30 years after the Milli Vanilli scandal broke, and then we saw maybe audiences embrace autotune, right? There's been a long line of artists who lip sync at live shows. We've seen reality TV shows like American Idol and the rise of social media that maybe help us disrupt the idea of what a pop singer can look like and what they can do on stage. And right now we're dealing with this idea of the ethics of AI in pop music. I think taking all those things into consideration, do you think audiences right now would be like, yeah, all right, I'm down with a Milli Vanilli type act?
Of course. I mean, one thing that bears mentioning is those songs were good, I think.
Oh, they were so good.
Like pop songs. These were great pop songs. And I think people now are a little less precious about the quote unquote deceptions of pop music, because what people were really angry about, and of course the documentary unpacks that anger and, presses it up against racial, a conversation around race and these type of things, and a global conversation. But I think people felt deceived. People, were kind of like, well, I feel deceived because I love this group and they weren't what they said they were. But also, people who saw their interviews and saw them speak, in a way, the deceptions were kind of like self-imposed. People were lying to themselves because they wanted to have this reality of quote unquote pure pop music. Now, Do people still lie to themselves about pop stars today? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's less about the kind of the manufacturing of the songs, the machinery of the songs themselves. I mean, we go to concerts, we see things on TV, we know people are lip syncing, and we just kind of accept it. You
Right.
know. Now, to be clear, I do think that if there is a way that this isn't a full one-to-one, because if, say, Beyonce came out tomorrow and was like, oh yeah, this other person has been singing my songs for years,
Yes.
that would be
different.
be a problem.
Yeah.
I think people would feel a way about that.
That's fair. Well, Hanif, I appreciate you being here, man. The documentary is absolutely fascinating. I would love for people to watch it and have thoughts about it and share those thoughts about it, because it does speak to that idea of what our expectations are of our pop artists. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and anytime I get to talk to you is a real joy. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. Hanif Abdelmahmoud is a culture critic and executive producer on the doc Milli Vanilli. It is out today on Paramount Plus. Hi, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and the show you're listening to is called Commotion. What you're listening to right now is a song called Pet Rock. It's a bit of Lorraine's new album, I Killed Your Dog. This is a record that Bandcamp has pegged as Album of the Day. And the reason we're playing it right now on today's podcast is we wanted to talk about what is happening over at Bandcamp. You probably heard about how the rise of streaming has made it so much harder for independent musicians to make a living. That is partly because services like Spotify end up paying way less to musicians than, the era where you sold an album and you made a little bit more money from it. But in the middle of this kind of bleak landscape, there was this small ray of light that emerged. This website called Bandcamp. And Bandcamp is basically an online platform that allows any artist, we're talking from Radiohead to your buddy's garage band, to sell their music and their merch directly to fans, and lets them pocket most of that revenue. Sounds like a pretty good solution. Yeah, well, in recent weeks, Bandcamp changed corporate ownership for the second time in 2 years. They also just let go of half their staff, and it's got a lot of people worried, not just about what the future holds for Bandcamp, but also this entire economy of independent music as we know it. Philip Sherburne is a contributing editor at Pitchfork, who recently wrote a piece called Is Bandcamp as We Know It Over? Philip, welcome to the show, man. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me. Good morning.
Of course, man. Let's do a little bit of background here. Bandcamp launched in 2008, back when MySpace was still a thing. Since then, it's become not just a popular website among artists and music lovers, but something they have an deep emotional attachment to. How do you think Bandcamp sort of developed this passionate community around it?
I mean, so for one thing, Bandcamp really has the reputation of kind of being a benevolent force in the world. It pays more. Artists they sell. For those who don't know what Bandcamp is, it's essentially a music store, of which there are fewer and fewer these days, where artists sell directly to fans. They take home something like 80% of the final sale of every, whether it's a record or a CD or a tape or a download. And so, they're earning a lot more on Bandcamp than they are from any of the streaming services.
Right.
Kind of on their own terms. And then Bandcamp's also doing all of these kind of goodwill gestures. Probably the best known one is Bandcamp, Bandcamp Fridays, which they instituted in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic, which is when, everybody was hurting, tours were canceled, DJ gigs were canceled.
Yeah. And
Bandcamp said, hey, this Friday, we're not going to take our cut. We're going to let you take home everything.
100% of the cuts. That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
And they kept it up. I believe it's remained a monthly thing, but it might be quarterly. I'd have to double check that. But they've kept doing it now for 3 years, and it's become a thing, right? It's become every Bandcamp Friday. I mean, my email, I basically have to just close my email for the day because I follow so many labels.
Yes.
It's just so-and-so has, released a new record.
Yeah. But you're talking about
so-
like a really beautiful space. Like you're talking about like a space that is like really cares for the artist, really cares about the way that you sort of artists make money, and wants to be protective of them. I think benevolent is a word that you use, and that's the right word for this. But then you kind of see over the past year or so, you've seen all these changes, right? The site was sold to Epic Games, which is this massive video game developer. People know them for Fortnite mostly. And then a few weeks back, it was sold again to a company called Songtrader, and then half the staff were let go. What do we know about Songtrader? What do we know about their intentions for Bandcamp?
Well, I don't think we know much about their intentions for Bandcamp, but we know about Songtrader. They're a B2B company, business to business, which is a different field than Bandcamp, because Bandcamp is a place to sell direct to consumers. And what Songtrader does is they license songs or really audio content to content creators, to game developers, to I think like TV producers. And so they have a big library of pretty much, I think, bespoke, like created solely to be licensed music. So you're a TikTok creator and you're looking for something to go with your legal, you're licensing
like
it.
a legally acquired sort of sound.
Exactly. And so they have this big database of that music, and I've dug around a little bit on it, and I have to say, I find it super clunky site. It's Bandcamp is gorgeous. The search works well. There's the beautiful editorial,
the best user experience, truly.
Yeah. And I went to Songtrader, and it's just kind of like it's just a grab bag of stuff. I went to like electronic dance category because that's kind of my realm, and it was just all over the place. I mean, it didn't make any sense.
There isn't like a clear vision of what this is.
No, and so their intentions for Bandcamp is supposedly, they've said that they want to institute sort of synergy. So you're an artist selling on Bandcamp. Now you can also license your music to content creators or TV commercials or whatever, which I'm
you
willing
can see
to,
that being a possibility.
A possibility. Although to me, it also seems like, I don't know how many millions of songs there are on Bandcamp. I mean, it also just seems like very unlikely that that's going to become a serious revenue generator for most of those artists. And it's also not what the artists have signed up for in the first place. So to me, they don't seem like two businesses that are a natural fit for each other.
Yeah. So I think there's something about the story is kind of a reminder of the risk that musicians face when they're so reliant on a particular platform, since a platform can change according to the whims of the owner. Maybe you got maybe a minute or so left here, but if the worst were to happen and Bandcamp became this shell of its former self, and do you see any hope on the horizon for musicians trying to share their music, trying to make a living somewhere online?
I don't right now. That's the,
no.
I in writing my piece, I tried to write sort of an optimistic conclusion. Then I was like, no, I'm lying to myself. I think the thing about Bandcamp is that it is so centralized. Everything is on Bandcamp, and it's all different sorts of musical communities, black metal, ambient, techno, you name it. And it's funny you mentioned MySpace at the top, because it is kind of a MySpace type thing in that everybody is there and every community is there, and they've got this network effect that has put them at the center of the musical universe. And so now, if they went away, it would just be scattered to the winds, Is there a successor? Not a successor. Is there another website that could sort of step in its place, at least temporarily? Do you see that? Or is it really the last one left? People have reached out to me like, hey, we're building this thing, we're building an alternative. And so, I'm willing to entertain that possibility. But at the moment, it feels like the last one left.
Philip, I was hoping for a hopeful note, but we are not going to get one today. And that's fine, because sometimes that is the reality of the world and the reality of trying to make art in this particular world. Thank you so much for your time, man. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Philip Sherburne is a contributing editor at Pitchfork. We were speaking about the recent sale of the beloved online music portal. It's called Bandcamp, and why musicians are so concerned about it. Listen, that is it for the podcast today. But remember, you can listen to any episode of the show wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can listen on YouTube. You can catch the entire show there every single day. I got to tell you that tomorrow on the show, we are talking about Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. It is a movie that everyone is talking about because, on the one hand, it is the swan song, maybe, of this story director. And on the other, there's a lot of maybe potentially controversial things to dig into. That's tomorrow on the show. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to be here tomorrow. And I sure hope that you're going to be there, too, because a lot to talk about. See you then.